Hey, Carl here to say that Music to Code By is now an app called Music to Flow By. Now you can listen to the tracks on your phone with offline capability. The first 3 tracks are free, and the entire catalog is available by subscription with a new track arriving every month. If you purchase the complete collection before October 24th, you can get a big discount. Check your inbox for an email from carl@pwop.com for the code, or just go to musictoflowby.com for all the links. Welcome back to .NET Rocks. This is Carl Franklin.
And this is Richard Campbell.
And we're in some back room somewhere at Microsoft Ignite in Orlando. And
as usual.
It's a huge, huge conference. How many people are here?
25, 30,000.
Oh my gosh.
You know, I remember the old tech heads we used to go to, and it was 15,000.
Right.
And they would just use the North and South Concourse, but now we're in the West Concourse as well.
But in the North section of the... Oh, no, we're actually not in the North section today. Yesterday we were.
We were in Georgia.
We were in Georgia yesterday.
Yeah. But there's now, you know how they always have the buses for tech ed?
Right.
There are 15 different bus lines for Ignite.
Oh my.
So it's just, you need 2 different buildings just to park all the buses.
It's crazy, but it's fun, and there's a lot of great people walking around here, such as our guest, David Carmona. But before we talk to him, we have this little thing called Better Know Framework to tend to.
All right, buddy, what do you got?
I did this program a while ago just based on a simple B-tree algorithm to make a 20 questions game.
Oh, yeah.
And so the idea is you think of something, and then the game asks you these generalized questions.
Right.
And sort of narrows it down to, are you thinking of a monkey or whatever, right? You know? Just in the last few minutes, I went looking to try to see if I could find that in my archives, and I couldn't, but I will, and I'll post a link to it. But what I did find was an online version of it that looks like the 1990s threw up all over it. By the way, this website, it's at 20q.net.
GeoCities called. They want their website designed.
Oh, yeah, it's great.
That's awesome.
www.20q.net. First of all, great domain. That's a coup.
Yeah, no kidding.
But basically, you think of something and it asks you all these questions. And I won. In other words, I beat the game. And after 26 questions, it gave up. But it asked me several times what, if it had a few guesses. But I was thinking of a putty knife.
Ah, that's weird.
And just, that falls into such a broad category of tools that, after a while, I mean, how do you distinguish a putty knife from a screwdriver, from a hammer? Like, you have to ask questions like, can you turn with it? You know?
Yeah, it gets a little precise.
Yeah, exactly. So I was feeling a little smug and thought I would share that. And as I said, when I do dig out my code, I will share that with you as well, because I think it's a good example of something that is logical, and interacts with human language, and pretty easy to program. And it's just a great exercise for anybody who wants to start thinking about algorithms.
Right, and they get much more complicated from there.
Yes, they do.
Awesome.
Yep, that's what I got, Richard. Who's talking to us?
Grabbed a comment off of show 1413, the one we did at NDC London.
Right.
Back in February of 2017. Actually, it was in January, but we didn't publish till February. And that was the machine learning panel we did with Jennifer Marsman, Evelina Gavrasova, and Barbara Fushinka. We had a bunch of comments on that show, but this particular one I think is going to be relevant to our conversation today, too. With Dave. This is from Stephen Burris, who said, machine learning is a very interesting topic. Throughout the show, there were comments on how it can affect advertising agencies, specifically around merchandise. At one point, there were a few comments on how these things can be misused. I'd like to hear more on this area. And there was an article on Motherboard, which is a great site, that talked about how data and algorithms were used in Brexit and the Trump presidential campaign. And it is scary how accurate these models are. From the article, it said, on the basis of an average 68 Facebook likes by a user, it was possible to predict their skin color with 95% accuracy, their sexual orientation with 88% accuracy, their affiliation to the Democratic or Republican Party with 85% accuracy. But it didn't stop there. Intelligence, religious affiliation, as well as alcohol, cigarette, and drug use all could be determined. From the data, it was even possible to deduce whether or not someone's parents were divorced.
Wow.
On previous shows, there was talk of Microsoft Connect and getting a 50% confidence rating on age, gender, and other demographic data. It is funny how these levels of confidence were acceptable and great for marketing people, while developers thought those percentages were horrible.
Yeah.
Different minds, different viewpoints on it, right? While we mainly focus on the data gathering being used for advertising and marketing purposes, it was never really mentioned in other contexts. You could do a giant version of junk stock schemes. You could even get massive public works projects backed and funded. You could totally crush a given business or even a whole government by eroding their popular support and enhancing their opposition. Think P.T. Barnum or the Ponzi schemes that have skimmed from large populations.
Yeah.
As a friend put it, this is really like swarm robotics, using very tiny nudges millions of times over to get really huge results. It's scary, but it's also inevitable. People are very susceptible to outside influence. When psychologists got into advertising, it totally changed the landscape of the ad and made billions for the companies involved. This is almost the same thing, but on an even bigger scale. I think that's definitely a talking point we have to explore. I've been doing talks on AI, and part of it has been this conversation about us as developers having to make conscious choices about our belief systems and what we want to use these powers, so to speak.
It's rubbing up against our moral questions. What would you do in that situation?
Absolutely. So, Stephen, thank you so much for your comment. I'm sure we'll be addressing it over the next hour, and a .NET Rocks mug is on its way to you. And if you'd like a .NET Rocks mug, write a comment on the website at .NETRocks.com or on any of our social media, because we publish every show to Facebook and Google+. And if you comment there and we read it on the show, we'll send you a mug.
And definitely follow us on Twitter. I'm at Carl Franklin. He's at Rich Campbell. Send us a tweet. We spackle him with putty knives. All right, let's introduce David Carmona. He's General Manager for Cloud and Enterprise and Artificial Intelligence at Microsoft. His team is responsible for leading Microsoft AI go-to-market across all enterprise and developer products and services in the company, as well as business strategy and execution. Welcome, David.
Thank you.
Very good to have you, sir.
I've always known you as a studio guy, David. I mean, we've done stuff on and off for many years. Worked on a couple of white papers together back in the day.
True.
When did you go over to the AI team? Because this is sort of brand new.
Yeah, so my story has been always between very close to .NET. So I've been always very close to .NET, being moving from marketing, developer marketing, so doing a lot of events, Channel 9, evangelism, and so on .NET, but then later after that on the broader, so I was the marketing lead for Visual Studio Team Services, and our entire development platform. But then I moved to engineering.
Yeah.
So I wanted to spend time in engineering, and I went, of course, to the .NET team.
Right.
Yeah.
Where else should I go? So I spent some time in there with Scott Hunter, Hanselman and friends. Had a lot of fun. But then they proposed me to lead the AI go-to-market in Microsoft. And boy, it is something new. So that was a stretch.
So this is an engineering team in the AI group?
No, this is a go-to-market including business and marketing.
Okay. So showing what we as developers can do with AI.
Exactly. So the two main areas that I focus a lot is, so it can be summarized in one sentence, right? So my goal and my role in Microsoft is about bringing AI to every developer and every organization. That's it, right? So I do everything that I can do to really help developers to, I couldn't say make a move because it's not really moving to another place. It's extending their capabilities, right? So working on how to bring technology, training, and resources together so they can approach AI. And then on the organization side is, of course, working on our business strategy, go to market with the enterprise.
So it begs the question, how do you define AI? This is one of the terms in a bucket of terms we've talked about lately that is grossly misunderstood and thrown around there. Like, is something as basic as a B-tree algorithm considered AI if it astonishes somebody,
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's a vague term, right? You have multiple ways of defining it. I always look at AI not as a technology. Technology or techniques is more machine learning, deep learning. Those are all techniques to accomplish something, right? That something is AI. It's more of a concept, of a goal. Now, how to define it? There are many, many ways of defining it.
Yeah.
If you go to Wikipedia, it's very vague, right? Because it's just basically saying machine showing intelligence.
Right.
Okay, so what is intelligence, right? Yeah. Then you go to what is intelligence, and there's a number of ways to define human intelligence. AI is not covering all of them. So it's a little bit misunderstood. If you look at what is intelligent, you can say things like self-consciousness, or creativity,
now you're getting into the Turing
empathy,
tests and things like that.
And then you get into the creepy territory as well, right? The way that we define and that we talk about AI is really about three things. So from everything that the human mind can do, we focus only on three areas, right? One is the concept of reasoning. And reasoning, which is a little bit vague term too, but it's about taking data and being able to reason on top of that data.
So it's the difference between reasoning and logic.
Exactly. So logic is about specific steps that a developer could develop, could program, right? Mm-hmm. Reasoning is more about getting imperfect data and then driving conclusions based on that data. It's a different model.
We can't even do that as humans. I mean, forget about computers.
Yeah.
But that's a very interesting area for anything that both developers and enterprises are doing on data. So anywhere that you have data, there's an interesting opportunity to use AI,
reason.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Because you will, not only you will find patterns that you couldn't see before by using the latest advancements on AI, but also it will even help you predict the future or understand the past better, right?
And this is, again, I feel like AI has become an umbrella term for a bunch of other tech that we've talked about over the years. Mm-hmm. Machine learning and predictive analytics are now under that umbrella. But I think when you talk about reasoning on data, I tend to think about those techs.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because then, so just to close on what is AI, and then we can talk about the technologies. There are two other things that are usually included in the term of AI.
Okay.
One is, which is not really reasoning over data, but it's more about understanding the world, right? That's a huge area for AI.
That's really
because of techniques that the ones that you are mentioning.
Mm-hmm. Now we have to define another term, understanding.
Yeah. Understanding.
When does a computer understand anything?
Exactly. Yeah. So there's a lot of gradients that we can put in there, but there's one fundamental concept which is going beyond the actual sense of the world, but the meaning of that, right? So it's more about understanding what is in an image, understanding what is the meaning of the text, right? It's the difference between searching for text or searching for meaning or entities or concepts, right? It's about that. And then the last one, which is also very popular to define AI, is human interactions, right? It's natural human interactions. It's how all the technologies apply to AI. What is allowing us is to remove the barrier between technology and humans, right? So those are the three areas that I usually...
Yeah. Well, I, for one, have a lot of experience programming artificial stupidity.
The line I've often used is artificial intelligence is the term you use for the tech that didn't work yet.
Yeah, that's right.
When we were trying to get a technology that would, identify an object, we call it AI.
Right.
Once it could identify objects, it was a vision system.
Or creepy.
Or you're turned creepy, It was AI when it was trying to play chess, but when it could play chess, then it was just a chess machine.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
And that brings an interesting topic, which is, we've been doing AI for decades, right? So it's just that now, and that connects with the techniques now, right? But it's only because we have now better techniques where we're talking about it, but we've been able to do it. We have self-driving cars 40 years ago.
Sure.
In the 60s, right? But they weren't very good.
No.
So you mentioned image recognition, object recognition and image vision systems. I think of handwriting recognition as something that you might fall under the umbrella of AI.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure.
What are some of the other things that, Microsoft is doing that fall under that category?
I think just taking a step back, I think there are two ways of looking at this, right? So one is about finished AI, and there's not a common term for that, which, we have like 5 pillars, and we talk about vision, we talk about speech, we talk about language, so things like language understanding. Sure. We talk about search, cognitive search, and we talk about knowledge, is understanding entities and understanding the concepts, right? But then that's only about the finished services.
Sure.
But you have all this platform for developers to build whatever the vertical they want to target, right? And that's another set of services that we talk about, which is more about enabling developers to target the scenario that they are really looking for.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
And so we don't need to talk about Skynet then, right? This is not, there's not a consciousness tool.
We should talk about the ethics behind
this. Well, and
it
just goes back to the comment that I read as well.
That comment is spot on.
Well, because I don't think we need a synthetic consciousness to do serious harm to our civilization with this technology. And I think he was pressing on exactly the points. Our ability to manipulate stories to affect minds using machine learning tools and natural language tools. You don't need an artificial consciousness to do that. We have natural consciousness that are trying to do that.
Yeah.
So there is absolutely an ethical aspect to this.
Yeah.
I wonder if it's always been true for development. It's just more true right now. That we've all, I think about the crazy stuff that Uber's gotten up to with their gray ball tech. And, I wouldn't put that under the AI umbrella at all. I just think it's mean.
And we should clarify what that is for those who don't know, that didn't follow that story, that Uber had in their app tracking software, tracking algorithms that worked even when you weren't running the app.
Sure. And they would hide themselves from regulators. They would hide themselves from Apple so that it didn't do a lot of its nefarious stuff if it saw it was in Cupertino. Like, it was these kinds.
Right.
And I think it was Grady Booch was on Twitter saying, I'm not angry at Uber. I'm angry at the developers who wrote that code. And again, it's not machine learning or necessarily about AI. What it is about the ethical issues we have around software development today because of the amount of power we have available to us.
At the end, it's just realizing that software is everywhere and every business is now about software.
Sure.
Right?
We're all software businesses.
It's a great responsibility that we have as developers. And that, as you said, is beyond AI, right? So every time that we write an application, the impact of that application, not only on the business, but also on the society itself, right?
It has to be considered.
Right? So
I think Microsoft is doing a really good job of focusing on the benefits to society that AI can bring. I'm thinking about the keynotes that they did at Build.
Right. The safety keynotes.
The safety keynotes, work
Like
safety. That person is not qualified to handle that particular piece of equipment. Send an alert. Or this person is in a hospital and had a heart attack. Where is the nearest wheelchair? Those are things that can improve the quality of life and even save lives.
And again, don't require an artificial consciousness. It's just, it's pretty much if this, then that. Tied to vision systems, speech systems, recognition systems.
And I think that's even going one step deeper on that outcome that you can see in the technology that we release. There's, and I love how Satya puts that even in his book, right? All of that is on top of the strong sense of culture and sense, right? That we have and purpose that we have in Microsoft, right? So I think that's the most important thing. If you have those principles anchored really strongly, then whatever you're going to build on top of that is going to align with that, right? And that's something important for us, right? So that's, I'm sure that you have seen Satya talking about this before, but just focusing AI on really augmenting people's capabilities and people's ingenuity instead of replacing humans is one of the key concepts that we have. And that is, that's easy to say, but it has strong implications, right? It's how we believe that humans should be in the loop for many reasons. There's of course the reason, the fact that having humans in the loop make always this technology be accountable.
Right.
Because you can have accountability on the decisions that the algorithm is making,
it introduces an element of morality.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's one important principle. The other one, and there's a lot of research happening in there, because the more we go and make progress on AI technologies, the more of a black box it becomes.
Right.
And that's tricky. So we have to make sure that we have a balance. And as we make progress on AI, we also understand it better.
Right.
And we know
openness to it
exactly all. Right. So, and we can track back why a decision was made, and we can trace everything so we can understand better what is happening when one of these decisions happen. That on top of keeping a human in the loop, that is one of the key things that we have to.
And it's certainly a talking point, especially in the deep learning space, where often in neural nets, reasoning about the decision making is very challenging to understand. It's and admittedly, I'm jumping just because I'm, very engaged in this topic that, there are models. There's an awful lot of machine learning models that are very clearly understood, right? You're using the strength of the computer to look at vast numbers of numbers and organize the data, but you could work your way through it and see it. Some of those neural net models, you just don't know why.
Right.
It's remarkably good at picking these things off because it did this learning model, and it's very tough for us to go back and say, how did it make this decision?
Well, it's sort of like I go back to your story of fixing a problem for a customer.
Right.
They had a computer that was causing problems, and you solved the problem by replacing the computer
rather than fixing it.
And rather than fixing it. And, that it turns out that at a certain point, that's the answer.
Yeah.
But it doesn't answer the question, what was the problem? You don't care what the problem, how you fixed it. You care that you fixed it.
That it's fixed. Yeah. It's an interesting question.
Yeah. David, just hold that thought for 1 second while we take a minute to hear a word from our sponsors.
This portion of .NET Rocks is brought to you by our friends at JetBrains. Hey, how often do you profile memory usage in your .NET apps? What if you could automate memory usage checks so that they're executed every time you commit a change? You can actually do that with .memory unit from JetBrains. .memory unit is a free unit testing framework for monitoring .NET memory usage. You write unit tests that check your code for all kinds of memory issues, and then run the tests on your machine or in a continuous integration server like TeamCity or VSTS, just like you do with regular unit tests. You can track how much memory is allocated, check memory for objects of a specific type to prevent memory leaks, or compare several memory snapshots in a unit test to see if memory usage is creeping up. Learn more and download .memory unit from jetbrains.netrocks.com, or just search for a package called .memory unit on the NuGet Gallery.
All right, and we're back. You're listening to .NET Rocks. Carl Franklin, Richard Campbell here at Ignite with David Carmona. We're talking AI, we're talking ethics, we're talking neural networks and geeking out a little bit. And I just wonder that software developers tend to be, I think, of the people that I know in this business, tend to have the optimistic idea that people are inherently good and given the right incentives will always do the right thing. We know that's not true. And so I think it's very easy for us to write software that we can't imagine anybody using in a nefarious way. And so it helps to have...
Look at email.
Yeah,
right?
Sure, right. Spam is a perfect example of that. How could this possibly be used for anything but great intentions? So I think that there have to be the cynical among us that are looking at everything that we do and saying, wait a minute, here's how these things can be exploited. Here's how these things can be gamed. And this isn't just an AI question, but it's a software question. I see this in any software that I write. The first question I ask myself is, okay, how can this be taken advantage of for nefarious purposes? And especially if we're living in this anonymous world, right? You look at mean comments on Facebook by anonymous people, this kind of thing, given the opportunity to be anonymous and do harm, if it benefits me, people will do it. So I don't know. I think that we have to have those cynical people out there looking at everything that we do and saying, wait a second, this could be a problem. So I guess this isn't something that software can solve, I don't think. Or is it?
Isn't there a group of the AI tech companies and specifically the cloud companies where you're sort of looking at some governance around this?
Yeah, I think that there are a couple of ways of looking at this. This is, as you said before, it's not different from any other advancement that we have in software development, right? And I think we need to think on two different angles. One is we have to come together. That's for sure, right? So there are a number of partnerships already in the industry that are very interesting to have those conversations, right? Because they're hard conversations to have, and they are not. I think something very unique in the sense of AI is that these conversations are not only conversations that should include technology companies. Yeah. So governments, communities, even academic institutions should be part of this conversation, right? So there's one that we're part of in Microsoft, which is Partnership on AI, and every single big vendor on AI is part of that. And that's something basic that we should do, right? So there should be a forum for us to discuss these hard topics and step back while we are moving on AI, right? Because the sooner we have those conversations, the better. So that's one thing. Yeah. The other thing that I think is important is we have to share. This can't be a black box, right? So we have to think what are, just like I remember 20 years ago, right? Remember the guidance for creating Windows applications, right? Yes. So every developer knows what is the style, how a Windows application is supposed to behave, right? We have to do the same thing for AI applications, right? And we're starting to do that. So you will see that we're starting to talk more and provide guidance and talk about that in conferences, right? So not only about the technology, but hey, what are the principles that you as developer can take? So this is aligned with strong values and principles, right? And we take that. So what we're basically doing is the principles that we have internally. So we spend time internally to tell every developer in Microsoft who's doing anything related to AI, they have to adhere to a set of principles on how they treat the data, how their AI will be used, things like accessibility for users of that AI, right? So that we're using that and we are sharing that with the developer community, right? I think those are small steps, but we have to. I mean, it's important that we don't focus only on the technology side, but also on the implications.
Well, I just like the intentionality of that you have, if you have to think about this at least as you get involved. Otherwise, it'll sneak up on you.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's exactly the way that we position it is, hey, before you do anything with AI, just look at this, be familiar with this. I mean, they are obvious things, right? But if you take them and you put in your mind before you start developing, it will be much easier, right? And it's just part of the process.
It makes a lot of sense. And it's cool to see the partnership in AI and just this idea that you can come up with a set of standards. It occurs to me that an awful lot of this code's going to run in the cloud anyway. So in some respects, the major cloud vendors, including Microsoft, can be gatekeepers to some of this technology.
I mean, you can look at the cloud. I look at the cloud more as an enabler, right? Because the reality is that the compute power that you require for the most complex scenarios on AI, you are going to require a lot of compute that without those cloud providers, it would be impossible for any company or enterprise to address one of these scenarios. So the cloud is really democratizing AI and not really containing it, right? Because, I mean, if you think about the investment needed to have, and think about the demo that we saw the other day in the keynote, right? 15,000 cores that you can spin in one click.
Yeah.
Do your AI training and then shut them off.
And shut it back. And that's the whole thing when you're talking about those deep learning models is that the hardest part is the training part. So you need 3 or 4 times more compute than is required to operate a model, to train the model. You don't want to pay for that huge infrastructure.
Yeah, imagine if every company
had to buy it.
That would be great. That could mean that AI would belong only to a few companies, right? So that's the issue.
Much more challenging as opposed to rent it by the hour. And in fact, do your job faster because you rent far more so you can get that model computed quickly and then can dial it back down again. That is a great example of utility computing. Like that's exactly what you want, that short duration problem being solved. I just wonder if the partnership on AI, one of the things is going to be sort of scrutinizing the kind of models and things that you're doing. Like, do we need to put rules around that? Do we have to be aware of what's being done on that infrastructure?
It doesn't go to that level of implementation. So the partnership on AI is more about defining what are those principles, right? And there's a lot of work to do there. Then how that translate into things like regulations, into things like guidance, norms, etc. That's something that is part of the journey. We're not there yet.
Yeah.
The key thing for that to happen, and that is something that is definitely part of this forum, is having the regulatory institutions as part of that, right? Because we do believe that this will require specific regulations, right? And that is something that technology companies shouldn't do.
Well, I would also argue you do not want lawyers doing it in a vacuum either. I think it's important for industry, for the experts to have a voice and to help make a plan that ultimately are likely to lead to some level of regulation.
Yeah.
Try and do it better than the internet. Like you think about the twists and struggles of the internet along the way, which have lots of good intentioned people and unexpected changes. We've got to be more thoughtful with this particular set of tools.
Yeah, and I think one of the key learnings from the internet is how this is something that should happen with a combination of government and technology companies.
I agree.
If they are separated, then they run at different speeds, and one is always behind the other and the other way around, right?
Yeah.
So it's complex.
Hey, Richard.
Yeah, buddy.
Guess what time it is now?
It must be that happy time again.
Yep. It's time to tell an artificially intelligent joke, which will be rated by the new Microsoft Humor Recognition Service. And I think this service is dumber than a bag of hammers.
Screw you, Franklin. You get a score of -0.
Well, okay.
Well, all right. Yeah. That's how your jokes usually go.
I know. But, I think if you don't insult the service, you might actually get a better rating.
That's something. Yeah.
That's the takeaway there. It's actually time to give away a D-Experience subscription to one lucky member of the .NET Rocks fan club. Become a UI superhero with DevExpress UI controls and libraries, and deliver elegant .NET solutions that address customer needs today and leverage your existing knowledge to build next-generation, touch-enabled solutions for tomorrow. Whether it's an Office-inspired application or a data-centric analytics dashboard, DevExpress Universal ships with everything you'll need to build your best, without limits or compromise. And check out their DevExtreme React Grid, built from the ground up to fully support all the cool features that come with React, like the virtual DOM and state controllers like Redux. It supports master detail, sorting, grouping, paging, and editing. And you can check it out and test it for free on GitHub. Learn more and download your free 30-day trial of DevExpress Universal at devexpress.com/superhero.
Well, all right, buddy. Who's our winner?
Today's winner, Richard, is Rob Howarth.
Congratulations, Rob.
Yeah. Rob just won a big pile of awesome from Dev Express, the D Experience subscription, just for being a member of the .NET Rocks fan club. And if you don't know what that is, go to .NETRocks.com, click on the big Get Free Stuff button, answer a few questions, and join the fan club. We have thousands of members all over the world, and every show we like to give away stuff from our sponsors. And every December we give away $5,000 technology shopping spree to one lucky member of the .NET Rocks fan club, but you have to sign up to win. And David, we'd like to ask our guests, if you had $5,000 to spend on technology today, what would you buy? And I know that you're going to say more access to the Microsoft humor recognition service.
That's the first thing, of course.
Yes.
Is the cloud considered a gadget?
You want more cloud? You haven't got enough cloud?
More Azure credits?
No, I think I could spend, if not all, most of it on my secret kind of hobby, which is virtual reality, right? So that's I've been always since virtual reality was not a thing. I always.
So do you have an Oculus Rift or a Vive?
No, that's why I would spend this money.
Yeah.
So this was back even in high school and then in college. I don't know how, but I convinced my teacher to buy one. And at that time, that was not an Oculus. That
really
was
expensive.
Pretty expensive hardware. I don't know how I did that, but that changed my life. And that was, I remember that the resolution of that was 320 by 200.
Nice.
And it looked awesome to me. So I did spend a nerdy moment, but I did spend a lot of time in college creating like a editing environment for 3D. So you could model the objects in 3D and then define the behavior of the wall. And so creating like an editor for virtual reality. I think I would that career another spin.
Yeah, it's like you were building the Crisis engine or the Rage engine, the 3D model environment that gaming season.
Yeah, and if you combine it with AI, that's heaven.
I remember seeing a video, and we shared this on the show. It was a video of somebody using an Oculus Rift to build themselves a developer environment in the Oculus Rift. So essentially, they made a screen, and whatever they typed went on the screen. So you're seeing the Oculus Rift, right? You're seeing what you're typing, but in a virtual screen. And then you could actually create statements to build graphics all around you while you're in the world. Yeah. And I just thought that was so meta.
It's very matrixy.
Yeah.
It was great.
Really interesting. I don't think we did this on the show. I think it was a conversation in between shows this week. We were talking about the folks that are using VR to help people learn to walk again.
Yeah.
But even when their nerves have healed, they don't know how to do the signals. And you can do therapy all day long and it may or may not work. But when you put on these goggles and are immersed in a world where you are walking, it starts to actually modify your body.
That's really exciting.
It's very interesting, just the capability to simulate the world well enough to even fool your own nerve endings.
Give your brain some feedback that it otherwise wasn't getting.
Yeah, it's very interesting to me. So many different possibilities, and of course, we're coming in. I'm looking forward to seeing what the new hardware is coming out at the end of this year for the VR hardware.
Me too.
I haven't invested in Oculus Rift yet. It needs a lot of computer.
I got the, as I said, I got the version 2 developer edition that was sort of low res and gave me headaches and stuff. But, yeah.
And it was cheaper than the production unit because they went to that higher resolution, higher frame rate.
Only a few $100s. Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. Yeah. It's crazy times, David. It's fun to have been in computing this long and just seeing where we are right now. And
if you look at it, it's so interesting to see how technologies that were discarded, I would even say discarded, right, at that time. Now, because of the new possibilities on both the hardware, but also about the algorithms that we have, there's a renaissance, right? And those two, AI, I mean, I remember also at the same time in college, more than 20 years ago, doing neural nets.
Neural nets in the 80s.
And it was the most awesome thing ever. And we were like, wow, this is a new wall of possibilities, right? And then because we didn't have enough hardware to run those models, it was just not practical, right? So we have another winter.
The internet has brought us so much more data. It's much easier to find a training set today than it's ever been before.
Right.
So huge amounts of compute, utility computing.
and algorithms.
And,
That combination is,
all those things
is
together.
key. And then VR was exactly the same, right? So when I was in college working on this, I thought, in a couple of years, I'm going to be working on this. There's no question that this will be on every home, right? And 20 years later, and this is starting to pick up, right?
Yeah, finally high enough resolutions and fast enough compute. Moore's law, applies to make it real enough that it doesn't make you sick.
Yeah.
And it's manageable. So here we are. I feel like we've done a somewhat academic conversation so far about AI, but I'm happy to set that groundwork.
Let's talk about
code. I think there's some .NET developers out there going, what do I write? Like, how do tell me what to type.
Yes. Yes, let's spend some time there. Where do you want to start?
Yeah, okay. How about the cognitive services? I mean, they just keep coming out with more and more good stuff. One of the AppVNext guys wrote a HoloLens app called What Dat? Where you basically look at something and say, what dat? And then it goes up to, takes a snapshot, sends it up to object recognition stuff. And
so cognitive services is a great way of getting into AI very quickly, right? And the way that I usually explain the approaches of doing AI development is kind of two different starting points. They all end in the same place.
Yeah.
But two different ways of looking at it. One is starting with finished services, right? And that's cognitive services, right? Is we train the models for you. We decide the algorithm for you. We decide how many layers this deep neural net, what is the connectivity between them. So all that complexity, we take care of it.
Right.
And then we expose it as a service.
This has sort of been the breakthrough in speech. I mean, I remember going back to the 80s, right? The Dragon Naturally Speaking Board that you had to train.
Right.
And now the speech services and cognitive services, it just works.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So for training those services, you need a huge amount of data.
Sure.
That not everybody has access to. You need huge compute, and you need also deep knowledge and expertise on building those neural nets, right? So that is a great way of starting. Now, the traditional problem with that approach is that it's usually difficult to use it for your particular scenario, right? So that was our key goal that we announced last build is how we're extending these services so they can be customized, right? And we have that customization across all the areas.
Yeah.
So for example, speech recognition, right? So that our speech recognition service, you can start from what is coming out of the box, but then you can customize it with your own data. So, for example, if you have a kiosk with specific noise conditions, you can upload to the service a recording for that environment, and it will custom train the model on top of that, on top of the training that we do for that particular scenario. We have that also for vocabulary. If you are a specific scenario that is going to be using custom vocabulary, that is not going to work out of the box on any service. So we provide the way for you to customize it.
And it's certainly when you get to specific applications, there's often a glossary of terms that are important in that app and nowhere else.
Yeah, it's critical that you have that. And there's not a lot of services like this that can provide that. And the same thing for every service, right? So we have the same thing for vision. So, out of the box, it will recognize a flower.
Right.
But what flower? Or it will recognize a bottle. But if you are in a manufacturing company and you want to distinguish between different types of bottle, you need to customize that.
Sure.
So we allow you to upload your own images to customize.
I get the feeling that, behind the scenes in these cognitive services, you're constantly upgrading and training the models, right? So, for example, in 2017, your experience of object recognition is going to be very different than what it was last year, what it's going to be next year.
Yeah, it's the perfect scenario for a service because we are always in the edge of the research. So you always have access to the...
And you're always training it with more and more images, and this is what that is. And,
So that's cognitive services. That's definitely the first place that will start to infuse AI into my applications, right? Because it has a lot of flexibility without the complexity of building yourself. But then there's another path, right? Another journey, which is starting from the other extreme, which is building your own AI, right? And that our goal in Microsoft is also, if the other one was about adding flexibility to something that is productive.
Right.
In this case, it's adding productivity to something that is flexible. Right? So that's our goal. This Ignite was all about that for us, right? So we announced things like new tooling. I mean, we are believers of tooling, right?
Right,
Of tools,
sure.
of course. And in my case in particular, I mean,
It's a
we all
tools
know
company.
we all know what a good tool can do in your
For sure.
in your experience. Not only productivity, but also the lowering the friction so more people can get access to it, right? So we announced this week, for example, Visual Studio, the extension for Visual Studio Code, so you can do AI, right? So it's adding productivity, things like deep learning, from the open point of view, of course, so you have access to any deep learning framework out there, from Cognitive Toolkit to TensorFlow to Caffe, and adding things that they sound very obvious for developers because we had those for years in software development, but they are not on the AI wall, right? So things like IntelliSense, debugging, autocompletion, code navigation, agility, right? Those concepts are concepts that were not on AI, right? So, and then on top of that, we added also tools that are more focused on the data prep. At the end, for AI, it's critical that you can sanitize your data. And you spend a lot of time, unfortunately, on that, which is not the best way of using your time.
It comes with the job, doesn't it?
Yeah. It's an ugly part of the job. We saw like 80% of the time on any developer doing AI being, I was
Data
going to say
cleaning.
wasted, but almost wasted on data cleaning, right? So,
But it's a thing that a human has to do, right? I mean, at this point, do you have AI to clean data for AI?
Yeah, but you saw what we did there. It's actually kind of that, right? So it was very cool. So we had this concept of prose, which is basically by example, you are able to, so you give examples on how the sanitized data looks like.
Okay.
And then out of that, the system will infer the rules and it will apply to all your data, right? So we saw that in some demos. Like, it's like magic, right? So you have a column that is all ugly, that you don't see anything in there.
Right.
And then you write some concepts that you want to extract, like examples. So for example, if there's a date in some weird format in the middle, you just put examples on what you want to extract as a date, and the whole thing will infer how to do it for the rest of the data, right? So that kind of tools we think that are going to be super interesting, not only to increase the productivity, but also to bring AI to more people.
So are you saying that as I clean my data, it learns that what I did, how I did it, and how it ended up looking? And after I spend maybe an hour cleaning data, it can probably do the rest.
It's actually way less, right? So the examples that we showed the other day is, in sometimes with a couple of examples, you are done. So you give the system a couple of examples and automatically you will see all the other data being cleaned. And the good thing is that behind the scenes is creating code. So then you can take that code and you can put it in your production system in the cloud, and you can scale to any data that you have.
Totally awesome. You made me suddenly think of, with the image recognition stuff, there was a Microsoft Cambridge project about identifying dog breeds.
Yeah.
And I quickly looked it up. It's still up. I'll put the link in the show notes, but it's called what-dog.net.
Yeah.
What dog?
And so I literally just grabbed, I have a dog. He's a Cairn Terrier. He chases bears because he's insane.
Yeah.
And I grabbed a picture of my wife holding him and fired it to it. He goes, that's a Cairn Terrier. I'm like, it's astonishing when you really think. I think you have to be enough of a software person to understand how hard that problem
of that, if you try to do it by yourself.
And I was feeling bad because I put a picture, with my wife in it too. It's like, oh, they're not going to figure this out. No problem. Not a big deal. It's a really interesting aspect of the whole training, just to sort of deal with stuff that we as humans just do naturally.
Yeah.
I wonder, there's a element of this whole, you need to be a data scientist, or you have to have, been in the research that you know what to worry about to try and make this work.
That's what you were talking about, building your own artificial intelligence.
That's one of the, it's a moment where we are now that, to be honest, I'm not going to say that it's easy, right? So we as developers, we've been going through these transformations all the time, and we're successful. I mean, it's part of the job, right? So we have to reinvent ourselves every time.
Well, I also argue that this is what Microsoft's been good at for years.
Absolutely.
Is letting us as traditional developers pick up these new skills.
So I think the critical thing for us in Microsoft is to make it easier, to make that transition easier, right? So with things like, hey, let's bring AI to where you are right now, right? And then you move with that. So bringing AI to Visual Studio, for example, for us, we think is a critical step in that direction, right? And bringing concepts. We brought, so some of the things that we announced the other day is bringing concepts that we're using for software development that we weren't using for AI, DevOps.
Right.
I mean, DevOps. We didn't have DevOps for AI. How bad is that, right? So having the concept of a continuous delivery, right? Continuous integration. Having the concept of simply collaborating in the team. That's something that we didn't have, right? So that's something that we just released is an experimentation service that developers can use to not only experiment with the models, but also have them under source control, right? On Git, and then being able to see the history there so I can understand how my model is progressing, and then being able to collaborate and share that model with somebody else and bringing it to production with a developer injecting it into an application, right? So that life cycle, that sounds so obvious for us developers, is not that obvious
But it's
in
not
AI.
tooling that I don't think has existed before to actually build a real workflow around building a better AI model for a given project.
Yeah.
So it occurs to me that you have these great object recognition vision systems and stuff, but on the audio side, it tends to be not so general. It tends to be more specific, like speech recognition, right? Like music recognition. What was it? Shazam? You know, the thing where you
Back
be
in the day,
listening to
identifying a song.
identifying a song, right? However, there is no such thing, as far as I know, of just taking a recording of anything, setting that up in the cloud, and having the cloud give you a general idea of what's going on in that audio, right? But this is something that our brains is ancient, right? I mean, processing audio is more high fidelity than vision.
And life-saving. This is how you know the tiger's stalking you, right?
Yeah, it's absolutely ancient.
Yeah.
So if you just close your eyes and sit, and listen to something, whatever environment you're in, the general classification of what's going on is actually really a complex problem and something that I don't see anywhere.
There's a project in the world for anything nowadays, right? So there are some projects that I'm aware that are not in the general sense of it, of anything from voice to an animal, but there's already deep learning models to recognize what you're listening to.
I mean, this is bacon frying. This is a barred owl in the woods. These are peepers,
there are some interesting projects on that.
This is a coffee machine. This is a Keurig machine.
You think about the ability of a master mechanic to listen to an engine and say, this is out of adjustment.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
A project that I was exposed recently is this wind, power
wind turbines.
turbines. They have, of course, they want, like any other manufacturer company, they love to predict any problem in the equipment, right?
Events.
And not only to know what is happening, but also predict what is going to happen. So they found that the cheapest way to do it was based on the sound.
The sound
that
of the
they're
turbine.
generating, right? So they have these small devices using AI, so they hear the vibration,
Right.
and then they're able to identify problems on the turbine or even predict what is going to happen in the future,
course,
which
because
is crazy.
There's just another sense, right? And that's a good neural net application. You basically correlate what the sound is with, did that thing break down? What were the problems?
Well, and how many times have you heard something go, that doesn't sound good?
Oh, yeah, the car. Yeah, we've been doing that for years,
the
right?
engine, a fan bearing, like any of those things,
Yeah.
right? The challenge now is you're talking about an offshore wind turbine where there's nobody to listen but a seagull.
Right.
And the fact that you can put instrumentation on it goes, that noise is not the same.
And again, very specific. Like you wouldn't probably see a Microsoft Cognitive Service for, diagnose your car by the audio it makes,
No.
Yeah.
That's something that people would have to write.
Would have to build, but it often, arguably makes a lot of sense. And I'm still going to make a call back to the comment, right? It's this whole, what can you infer from the data you have?
Right.
Whether that's audio or visual. Like, I just like this statement of understand the world in the AI space. It's like, given a set of senses that now represent data, what can you infer?
Heck, infrared information, radiation.
Well, that's an interesting aspect, isn't it? Let's go outside of human senses and into, more extreme senses, that this ability to do multispectral analysis.
Right.
In the end, audio is just a lower frequency light, right?
It's sort of a high-tech version of, squalls are coming because my big toe's throbbing.
That's right. Yeah. Very much the high-tech version of that. I mean, certainly on the cognitive service side, it seems super approachable now. It's just a set of APIs. You call out to it. You don't need to know an awful lot. Every experiment I've ever done with this stuff, it just worked. It was almost anticlimactic.
Yeah.
But it does seem still more challenging, and I guess with the announcements that have just come, to really sit down and say, I want to build something.
Yeah, the other thing that we as Visual Studio developers are very used for application development is how many times we have learned a technology by doing file new project.
Yep.
Yeah.
That template,
Oh, yeah.
that is a lifesaver,
Yeah.
right? So we are using the same paradigm, right? So we're
Yeah.
trying to use a lot of the good learnings that we have for traditional software development to AI. So now in these tools, you have the concept of file new project, and we are creating a bunch of templates
Oh, wow.
that goes from predictive analytics to demand forecasting to marketing algorithms to anything that you can think of. You have a template that you can start from, and then you can customize. So you don't need to start from scratch, or you can use it just for learning. Hey, how should I approach this? Let's see how this template is approaching this problem.
So let's get back to this potential application of, diagnosing a car by its sound. I'm going to have something that is in my car all the time when I'm driving and recording it and sending that data up into a data bank somewhere, and then correlating that with the other things that I pull off the computer of my car, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe I have that. And I guess what I'm saying is, given the current environment of AI in Azure, where would I start with that? I mean, you're typically talking about data that can be stored in a database. There's numbers there, but now we're talking about binary data. Now we're talking about audio data. Mm-hmm. How on earth do we get any kind of meaning out of that?
Well, that brings another very interesting topic to discuss, which is the edge. So in that situation, I don't even know if I would go to the cloud for that.
Yeah.
Right.
So I would think of a model that brings that intelligence to my car.
Yeah.
That is connected to the cloud, but not continuously. So I wouldn't send an audio stream probably to the cloud in real time, right?
Yeah. Okay.
So would you do the learning in the cloud and then take the learned model and run it locally?
That's the whole DevOps concept as part of these services that we're announcing has a lot of that, right? So you can manage your training, understand the history of that.
Right. In this big infrastructure.
Yeah, in the cloud infrastructure, right? So you can spin thousands of cores for that.
But once you've got a good model.
But then once you have the model, you deploy it. And the way that you deploy it is to package it in a container.
Right.
So we do support the ability to take that scoring. So not the training part, but the scoring part.
Right.
You put it in a container, and now you deploy that container anywhere you want. The cloud, on premises, or all the way to the edge, right? So that's beautiful. I mean, in these scenarios, it's critical that we have a model like that you have, even in cases that you don't even know where the model is going to be. Right? So you need something that can abstract you from that.
Absolutely.
Well, David, thank you very much for talking to us. It's fascinating. The stuff that you guys are doing is great. And I love the fact that these services just keep getting smarter and smarter, and we should be using them more and more.
Yeah. To the audience listening, we would love to get your opinion here. So you as .NET developers, where are you? What are the key things that you need? Yeah. How can we help you more to infuse AI into your application? So happy to hear any comment on that.
Absolutely.
Thanks again, David.
And they will get a Mac, right?
Yeah.
We always do.
Thanks again, David.
Thank you very much.
All right. We'll see you next time on .NET Rocks.
.NET Rocks is brought to you by Franklin's Net and produced by Pwop Studios, a full-service audio, video, and post-production facility located physically in New London, Connecticut, and of course in the cloud. Online at pwop.com. Visit our website at dotnetrocks.com for RSS feeds, downloads, mobile apps, comments, and access to the full archives going back to show number 1, recorded in September 2002. And make sure you check out our sponsors. They keep us in business. Now go write some code. See you next time.
Got transmitter banned by the FCC. Yes, I'm a toy boy. Life is hard.